Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we delve into the minds of tech leaders and innovators shaping our digital world. I'm Lee, and today we're joined by the dynamic and insightful Mahmoud Yassin, Senior Data Manager at Booking.com. Booking.com is one of the world's largest digital travel platforms, serving over 28 million listings and processing millions of daily searches and transactions. Mahmoud plays a crucial role in translating this ocean of data into strategic action. Today, we're diving into how data powers real-time decisions, how AI and human intuition can complement each other, and what it takes to build a truly data-centric culture. Mahmoud, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lee, for having me. I'm super excited about today. And I'm happy to share some insights with all the listeners.
Well, let's get to it. Let's start with your story. You've had a fascinating journey into data leadership. Could you walk us through your career path and what ultimately led you to your current role at Booking.com?
Yeah, sure. I come originally from Egypt, where I was graduated. I studied computer science in the Faculty of Computers and AI University, the Cairo University. And after that, I worked in my home country for about 2 years in the telecom industry. And I always say that I've been lucky because in graduation, of course, no one teach you exactly what you're going to do. So you learn about, this wide spectrum of many topics. But somehow the first job that you land in kind of shapes your career in a way. So for me, it was data. It was a data engineer at one of the largest telecom operators. And then all of a sudden, you go into trying to deal with millions of calls and records and stuff like that. And that's like around 2008. So it was mainly Oracle Exadata was kind of a brand new database at that time, and everything was relational, which is sort of like the classic way of dealing with data. Mm-hmm. So it was quite interesting to learn on all these amount of massive data that comes through telecom and network, etc. And a little bit after that, I moved to Asia, where I worked in the Gulf region for about 6 years, still continued in the telecom industry, worked there for the two biggest operators over there. But instead of like being a data engineer, I also learned a little bit that, hey, data engineering is just the plumbing, but the real data counts when you deliver insights. So I went into the business intelligence, which is not like far away, but kind of complementary. So I knew how to move data, transform it, triangulate, etc., and also how to bring insights out of it through dashboarding, analytics, etc. And at that time, there was also the huge wave that's around unstructured data and Hadoop and that ecosystem that comes with it. And I found that fascinating because most of my experience was on structured data. Now you have another dimension where how you can deal with unstructured data. So it was quite interesting. I learned how to set up my own Hadoop cluster at home, connecting all my commodity laptops and getting a lot of failures, etc. Mm-hmm. Then also cloud was kind of moving as well. So I said, maybe it's smarter to do it in AWS. I went there, did every EC2 setup, everything was working fine. But I was new there, so I forgot to turn off the machines. So I got a very expensive bill afterwards. But then I've learned also something there. And after, I would say, successful 6 years in Asia, in the Gulf, I got an opportunity to come to Europe. And first job, I landed into a consultancy company. I was based in Poland, where I was serving the biggest Scandinavian bank called Nordea across the Nordics. So I was leading the analytics of the detection financial crime kind of unit over there. So how can we filter out all the bad behaviors, human trafficking, let's say money laundering, etc. in the system. And that was also purely on top of big data and Hadoop ecosystem, which is something that I loved because that was also something I wanted to grow towards. And after that, I landed to the Netherlands, where I've been here for the last 8 years. And here I worked for mainly two big companies. The first one is a bank called ABN AMRO. It used to be a quite international bank. So nowadays it shrank a little bit. But it is, of course, well known in the Netherlands. I started again also as in the architecture team in the big data space. And then from there, I grew up also into leadership roles where Eventually, before I left, I was managing 7 teams, handling or building actually some innovative solutions around data management called the Data Marketplace, where we wanted to automate the entire data lifecycle from production to consumption through a nice and easy and one-stop shop, and instead of the tsunami of tools and technologies that you run into it. And perhaps we'll come back into this concept later. And after 5 years at ABN AMRO, for me, one of the most periods in my career, then I moved to Booking.com, which is headquarters in Amsterdam. And of course, the brand is well known. And here at Booking, I'm responsible for elevating the data management and data governance practices to do more and more, because things are getting more complicated, more data, more analytics, but also more governance required. So we can talk all about AI, but the data that feeds the AI, that's what it matters. So that's something that I work upon. And on a personal side, I'm married. I have 3 kids. All of them are boys. So it's quite an interesting at home. And the last one just came 7 months ago. So small baby.
Congratulations.
So to do the podcast, I had to run away from the home. Otherwise, you will see some like...
very, very well thought through there, and clearly a wealth of experience. But as senior data manager at Booking.com, then what does a typical day look like for you? Are there any current projects or use cases or challenges?
It's a very good question. So apart from the good coffee in our new brand new office in Amsterdam Central, which is a piece of art, I'd say. My day starts, of course, with my team and doing the regular stand-ups and agreeing into what we're going to do. But functionally, what we're doing a variety of things, right? So it ranges from data quality, data lineage, metadata, and bunch of other, let's say, capabilities that we want to enable. And also worth mentioning a little bit that my position at the company, because also we are adapting a little bit of a decentralized approach. So I work in the business line. So all my previous experiences were in the IT/data, let's say, departments, which comes from a highly centric kind of structure from the organizational point of view. But if you, when you hear a little bit about decentralization and federated kind of governance, etc., this is where things need to be pushed a little bit towards the business in order to let the right people become closer to the data that they produce or they own. And with that also, you need to think of, okay, how you're going to structure your teams, etc. So what caught my attention for this role is that I would experience being in the other side a little bit, in the business side. And that is something that I keep learning every day, because now after almost 3 years, of course, I picked up the business better than, let's say, the biggest roles where you are sitting in the data, let's say, or the CDO organization and trying to help, let's say, of course, the business, but you're not also business 100%, right? So that kind of interesting part, or let's say that kind of position, I find interesting. And so I work in the business team and responsible for the data management and data governance of that business unit that I'm linked towards. That means that I meet with all the business people, from product managers to product developers to analysts to engineers, etc., within that ecosystem. And I have also the role of coordinating everything that comes from the data department and the chief data officer department. So it's kind of the linking pin between business and data/IT. That's something that I find quite interesting at Book.
Really nice. Yeah. So not purely focused on the technical side, but you have the kind of strategic and business side of things as well. So hopefully well placed to answer some more kind of data focused questions here, because obviously Booking.com is often, I think, cited as one of the most data mature companies. Where testing and optimizing and iterating are kind of like embedded in the DNA. How does the company use data to enhance customer experience, personalize interactions, drive key business strategies?
I think we have a lot of initiatives and a lot of ways that we do to our data, starting from, first of all, capturing the data. You're talking about a service that's globally enrolled, and that scale is scary and massive. So the footprint is around, I don't know, a few hundred terabytes a week, which
Mm.
is a lot. So it starts all the way from how you can capture the data. And the most interesting part is that capturing the data at Booking is not a linear or not static process, because we go heavily and we will known for our A/B testing kind of implementation. So we run hundreds of experiments live on our website every
Yeah,
second.
I've even seen that like over 25,000 A/B
Yeah,
tests per year
exactly.
or something like that, right? That's
It's kind
mad.
of our pioneering, let's say,
Yeah,
piece of art of engineering, which is
yeah.
around 20 years old, by the way. So as
Oh
old,
well.
a little bit younger than the company, but yeah. So it started 20 years ago, and that means that, let's say, if you are in Amsterdam and probably you're gonna see something else. If you are part of the A part and the P part could be someone else seeing something different, that means that you have to capture both, right?
Mm.
Both the data points that's relevant to you, to your search, and then because our ultimate goal is to personalize this layer, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot simply do personalization if you don't know what your preference is, what is your usual search queries, etc. So back to your question, starts from capturing the data. So we have a lot of engineering work going into there to store the data. And then next, how to store this amount of data in a way that enables analytics and make it easier for also all our product teams to analyze and get access and improve, etc.
Mm.
So capturing, storing, then when it comes to analyzing the data with this massive scale, we are also in a huge transformation projects moving towards the cloud, because of course scalability matters here, right? So
Mm. Mm.
even we had one, if not the biggest cluster in Europe, that was not enough, right? Because the demand keep growing, the
Mm.
analytics needs, the AI needs are there. So you need more powerful machines, you need hardware, you need layer architectures, etc. So with that kind of infinite scaling, it's hard to keep up with on-prem. So yeah, huge transformation projects towards the public cloud. And that gives us also a lot of possibilities and unlocking a lot of new dimensions for analytics
Mm.
and bringing or having value out of the data. So we store the data. We have some techniques on how to transform it on the fly, but also how to store it at rest. And then we give a flexibility to our analysts, engineers to either access the raw data because of data science or a machine learning model or something around that. Or if you want to access the highly aggregated data through traditional dashboarding and stuff like that, that's also available. And of
Mm.
course, recently also developing or adapting a lot of the AI practices also. How can you get insights, let's say, by chatting to a bot? So
Yeah.
it goes end to end. And
Mm.
again, with the complexity and the scale of the company, it puts a different dimension. That's by far the biggest company
Mm.
from a data point of view that I've worked with. And with that, I've learned, or I'm learning even every day, some new challenges that comes with that. Because hey, you can have a cool data warehouse or a data lake if you're talking about few terabytes, but
Mm.
multiply that by 100, and then that adds a bit
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
complexity to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously, talking there a lot about kind of sheer volume of data, right? And I was also reading how it, this testing culture at Booking.com, like where product teams are empowered to test almost anything, provided it can be measured and reversed. I saw. But with this scale of like experimentation and such massive data volume, how do you ensure that insights derived are kind of actionable and actually lead to kind of tangible improvements? They're not just interesting insights.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good question and leads directly to my also role, because um, you could say, like, together with my team, we focus on the basics, which is kind of maybe with the hype of AI and what LLMs can do, etc. We are kind of forgetting. So we focus, for example, on how to ensure that our data is of good quality. But even if you
Mm.
think a little bit, our data is huge. So what part of the data is or should be focused on? So we have strategies to even cluster and prioritize the data elements within, let's say, one data point or one data set, in order to put the most important effort in the most important data. Because if you open it for everything, you will never end, and then you'll also waste your resources, and then you won't be focused. So start from having a strong strategy in clustering, let's say, the data into what's known in, let's say, our data management space as CDEs, critical data elements. These are data elements that's essential for running the business, or essential for the regulatory needs, or essential for highly required analytics. So also my message, like also for the listeners and audience, like you need to have a strategy for characterizing your data efforts, because it's costly from a human point of view, but also from resources, from tooling, etc. So we start from that kind of strategy and then prioritize based on that. And then for those, let's say, highly impactful data points, we apply all the basic, let's say, kind of, from data quality checks, ensuring that the metadata is maintained very well, make sure that the ownership is known. That was a huge challenge at the company, but now it is being in the right direction. We also applied that stewardship model. So if you want to talk to someone about the business side of the data, whom you reach to. If you want to talk to someone from a technical point of view, who do you or should you reach to? Also from data management point of view. So let's say, how can you also talk a little bit data management with certain people? So we have our ownership model clustered to take care of the business, technical, and data management part. And then also see this execution and then apply, let's say, the most basic data quality checks by default for certain elements and data types, but also emphasize on capturing the business meaningful, impactful DQ checks that affects the quality of the data. And then we build the whole ecosystem around capturing those signals and then showing them and make them actionable. So if what are the most important CDE, critical data elements, for example, expected to have a positive value, but somehow you have a negative value in the data, then alerts, a severe alert will be raised, and then through the ownership service and all the stuff I talked about before, then we know whom to notify, and then reach to them, and then ask them to proactively, and of course, to make a call for action, and then fix the data. So we try also to fix it at source as much as we can, so it doesn't happen again. So it's a kind of an ecosystem of things that you do. And at the far end right of it, then you see the insights. And to make these insights actionable and accurate, that's why my role exists and my team members as well exist.
And in this kind of culture that's clearly so like data driven, when it comes to these insights, the kind of the end game here, how do you avoid data paralysis? Or do you ever end up in this data paralysis? You know, that moment where there's so much information, so many possible directions, where teams are struggling to make a confident move. How do you deal with this?
Yeah, I think also I want to highlight that this is not, let's say, we're not here to share like only like happy scenario kind of thing, because there's a lot of challenges and a lot of learnings and a lot of failures as well during this journey. So indeed, at the far end, most of the time you get too much information that requires really an expert to pick up, let's say, the decisions and then act upon them. So, for example, to give you an how we improve this, since we spoke about the experimentation tool that we have, this is all about deciding at the end of an experiment whether you will go full on, like enable it for the wide spectrum of audience, or this experiment is kind of not satisfying the needs. But how to judge that, right? So there has been a lot of iterations, but we ended up, let's say, that we have a catalog of standard KPIs that we measure all the experiments against. So, for example, if you wanna, let's say, measure that change of color or a button or a banner or any different ranking methodology in the search, etc. Eventually, we have KPIs like room night booked, right? So how many room nights has been booked after this change and how many have been booked before. That kind of standardization of the KPIs helps a lot, because it doesn't give room for kind of interpretation, and also doesn't keep a role of that the analyst is inventing whatever KPI. You
No.
cannot choose your own KPI. There's a process to onboard a new KPI, but
Yep.
the existing ones are there. You just need to pick up what you want to be evaluated against. And of course,
Hmm.
the main ones are picked by default. And then once the experiment runs, you get a clear page where all these KPIs and the numeric values corresponding to them are mentioned.
Mm.
That helps a lot in the decision making, because if you see an improvement in the KPI that you are looking for, then you can talk and go through a process if this is a good thing. And also
Mm.
something very interesting happens, that sometimes to just demonstrate how you should also be flexible in a way with all these data points. Sometimes you have this cascading effect, like you are measuring, let's say, room nights booked, but then you see with this experiment that another KPI got maybe, let's say, badly affected. But then you
Right.
start to do some correlation, right? And understand what was the consequence and why this has been
Mm. Mm.
affected. And maybe the secondary effect you didn't notice from the beginning, or you
Yep.
didn't consider, now you have to reconsider. So
Mm.
making
Mm.
sure that all these data points clear and simple enough and standardized
Mm.
helps a lot in taking the decision. And
Yep. Yeah. Um, and in terms of decision making, we're obviously in a moment where AI is becoming increasingly more used, increasingly central to decision making, essentially. But as powerful as these like algorithms are, human context, experience, I mean, human ethical judgment as well, still play a vital role. How do you balance automation and machine learning with human judgment and this kind of domain expertise at Booking?
yeah, so the AI, and let's say, if you take a little bit, let's say, look before the last hype, I think
Mm.
we've been in the ML journey since the start of the company. So it's not
Mm.
something new in our DNA. And
Yep.
that's easy demonstrable when, if you talk to any product team, you'll always see data scientist and machine learning engineer hooked and involved and big part of the team, because
Mm.
most of the stuff that you see in the website or the app is powered by powerful algorithms, and then something. But that has been there for many years.
Yep.
Of course, with the recent development and of course the evolution of LLMs, of course we're also partnering and also doing a lot of innovation over there. We can talk about some of the new stuff that has been released recently. But indeed, so the fact that you have the human factor engaged and it's not fully decidable by the AI, we have a strict review process, that
Mm.
helps a little bit, because at the end, again, back to the data, of course, data garbage in, garbage out. So the
Yep.
AI will just give you a recommendation, but then you need also to have some kind of human balance as well to check,
Mm.
because sometimes the stuff doesn't make sense, and then who's going to spot that? Then you
Yep.
need a human eye, or a 4-eye principle, for example. And that's something that we take care of and keep considering that as well. So don't, let's say, trust 100%, but also don't, let's say, leave it at all. So some kind of a
Mm.
balance. And you
Yep.
will see also that in our processes, even from ideation of a new idea of the product all the way till having the feature live, there's a lot of governance processes and committees and reviews, and you have to prove your value through either experimentation or something else. At least we hope, or we aim to make it really data driven. That decision is powered and backed by data, and
Mm.
this data is being reviewed as well by a human.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I was also reading how like a large chunk of executives don't fully trust the AI driven decisions without this kind of human validation, right? Particularly when it's high stakes environments, which is completely understandable. How do you personally know when to question a machine learning model? Are there guardrails or processes in place to prevent like
Yeah.
an over
Yeah, I think
reliance
that's
on
a very
automation?
important question. Yes, of course, because an AI without a guardrail can be quite misused, if I
Mm.
can say. And we do take a lot of measures to ensure that doesn't happen. So we also don't trust fully, let's say, the AI service, especially from a third party. So we come with our own architecture where all the prompt has to be stored locally first in, let's
Mhm.
say, a database that we control. And then we have our own models that supervision and reviews all the prompts and ensures that it is compliant, it is also secure, and it has no personal data, for example, to be exposed to the third party LLM integrations that we have. And that's all kind of monitored automatically. And then if the prompt process or passes the checks, then it moves to the third party, and the response is being kept as well. So we have the footprint of the question or the prompt and the reply as well, both kept locally in our own controlled, let's say, database. And on top of that, as I said, we built some models to check the validity, the integrity, the security, if there's like any possible leakage, for example, or any kind of risk associated with that. And only if even the response checks all the balances, then that query passes away to whatever system that it should integrate to. So that's something that we've developed locally, and even our recent AI trip planner, which is an LLM backed kind of interface where you just chat with our prompt, and then it's capable of booking your entire experience and entire journey from within the interface. So that also has a mix between our own machine learning models, but also integration with third party as well. So we had to build those guardrails to ensure that there's no misuse, there's integrity, there's security, etc.
Yeah, and talking of this kind of data governance and security or compliance as well, I mean, obviously regulatory changes are kind of reshaping how companies collect but also kind of use data, right? Laws like the Digital Markets Act, and obviously without needing to mention GDPR, how is this kind of impacting, or how is Booking kind of adapting its data strategy to ensure this compliance, but also kind of using the data to improve customer experience?
Yeah, I think that's also a very important question, because indeed a lot has changed over the last few years when it comes from regulatory needs. You could say, like, that's not the case, like, say 5 or 10 years ago. But the good part is, like, with the Digital Marketing Act, we've been very engaged with regulators, with the EU regulators, and we've been seen as the leaders in this space, meaning that we are helping them crafting also the regulation itself. And that also gives us a responsibility to also act and also build and report all the required and even define the required KPIs. So over the last 2 years, we've been super busy in co-working with regulators and building up this rich kind of KPIs that can help in also, because the idea of a regulator, of course, is not just to piss people off. Its idea is to really lay it back to the consumers, which is us eventually, right? So we see it from that angle, and we work very, very good with the regulators. And as I said, we've even clustered as the leaders in that space, in the travel space, and that gives us the responsibility to build a lot of regulatory needs. And of course, structurally, we have set up a lot of teams, projects, and with a high priority, let's say, focus on all the required, let's say, data points. But also that gives us a very interesting perspective, because also sometimes in the organization, if you want, let's say, to report on a specific number, let's say how many visitors, let's say, came through your website, and that visitors, or what we call them travelers, can vary, right, from system to system. Do you count only human, or can you also consider the automatic bots that keeps getting through, let's say, third party, or programmatically programmed to come and search also to our website? And then if you cluster to human, then okay, what kind of human are you talking about? A guest user or a logged in user? And then there's a lot of cascading questions that was also kind of new to us. So we had to co-work with the regulator in the EU to come up with a more defined, let's say, KPIs, because it was quite vague at the beginning. And then also that gives us also the possibility to master our own tools from data lineage, again, for example, which is something that can trace back the origin of the data and then challenge the numbers, or even ensure that I am reporting the right numbers. So that also ties back to the data management importance and all of this. So if you have a profound and a very kind of solid architecture and also tools that support, for example, data lineage, which is nothing but a lot of metadata that you collect from all your systems and the logs data, etc., and blend them in a way to showcase from where you got that number. That gives us confidence to report, but also give the explainability to the regulator of from where and how this number came to existence, for example.
Super. So to talk a little bit more about kind of building teams and also like this data-centric culture as well. What strategies have been effective at Booking and for you to kind of promote data literacy across teams, especially for these kind of non-technical users? Obviously, this is probably more important for you now that you're more focused on the business side of things rather than the technical, right?
Yeah, this is a very interesting point because soon enough you will see the tsunami of tools, AI-powered tools that everyone has access to. But then, are we using it effectively?
Exactly.
I can foresee this dilemma, and even currently, sometimes now we have too much under our fingertip. So the question is like, how can you also use the right tool for the right purpose?
Yeah.
And of course, that drives us or take us to the strategy that each company should have, like learning and education. Let's say department focus on helping either to rescale or upscale employees, for example, to learn new skills. So if you think of, let's say, AI as the new toy, you need to get some practice and let people, let's say, get closer, because of course from the outside it's cool. You can always prompt, hey, what's my latest email, and summarize it. But if all people are going to use it just for summarizing, then that's also a highly expensive Ferrari that you have. And at the end, you just need to go to drop your kids. That doesn't make any sense. So we invest a lot in educating, and that comes in many forms and in many shapes. So we do a lot of course, internal podcast or knowledge share, etc. But we also have a very good tradition of hackathon, a global hackathon across the entire company, where we kind of have some categories for innovation, and then we let everyone to submit an idea and work on it for 3, 4, 5 days dedicatedly on trying to prove if this idea is right or wrong, and then goes into some kind of verification, and then there are always winners. And what this creates, it creates this kind of culture of, hey, this team is building this, and of course you can pick up anyone. So you just open, hey, I'm gonna work on this cool idea, and anyone in the company can contribute. So it creates this kind of dynamics internally where people try to make an impact. And guess what? Like, some of the really cool features that empowers, let's say, our company and our website and app is coming from these kind of internal hackathon and more empowerments that we give to the employees to innovate. And of course, quite recently we had this interesting hackathon about prompt engineering. So the competition was, hey, show us your best prompt, in a way. Of course, the hidden or the idea behind it is at the end to share what people are using and how they are using the LLMs, for example, to be more innovative. And I must say, the response, I thought that I'm doing a lot, but once you unlock someone else's creativity and make it shareable, then you get to know that there's, oh, wait, you can do even that. You can scan all my documents and summarize all my efforts in the last months and maybe prepare a report. That's something that sometimes you keep forgetting what you have done and what meetings you've been in if you are so busy, etc. And now in 1 second, let's say under 1 minute, you get to know that very quickly. And then you just, of course, you have to validate it and make sure it is the right data, etc. But these kind of things are really amazing, but you'll only know that if it gets exposed and the potentials are exposed to you. And of course, we have our own academy and our own learnings as any, of course, other company, but we keep investing in make it very relevant, very intuitive, because also the traditional ways of, getting a course can be sometimes kind of boring. So we also invest in make it more interesting and catchy. Plus, we go heavy on events and celebration.
Mm.
So that also helps a lot.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a nice culture. I think these hackathons are really good ways of getting people on board, right, and drawing out that potential, like you're saying, from all these creative minds across an organization. Have you encountered like this resistance to like this data driven change, or like have you struggled to kind of get this buy-in within the team or across different teams?
Yeah, I think it's again a very interesting question because, of course, um, not everyone would be just willing to change, right? So
Mm.
that's something that's even in the human nature.
Yep.
So I'm used to my car, let's say my home, etc. And whenever you try to change it, it's not an easy decision. But we understand that, right? Of course, we always have people who are resisting, and our strategy is to always show what's in it for you first before the company. So when you move, let's say, to this new model, or if we move to this new ranking algorithm or search algorithm, etc., backed by data, we showcase the importance and reflect how this can be kind of reflecting back to us, the company, but also to you, because then you will be more data driven, you will learn new technology, and this algorithm is highly optimized, for example, or more efficient. And then we show it from, I don't know, all kind of resources point of view, hardware, software, etc. So the idea is to always make it relevant for the people, and of course, showcase and highlight the champions out of the team who did the change. And I would say even from that resistant group, if you manage to get them along, always pick up from that group and let them empower them to share their stories, because it will be more
Mm.
kind of touching and coming from a struggle. And I keep enabling that in my teams at least, and then it pays off. So
Mm.
look always to the human side of why people are resisting, rather than, hey, it is what it is, or it has to be
Yep.
enforced. Because that strategy, yeah, may work in the beginning, but then I do care a lot about the employee to be happy and coming enthusiastically enough to achieve, because without their motivation and without their enthusiasm, you just have some robots, and then, yeah,
Yep.
and they exist, by the way. So that's also
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can if you're looking for that kind of systematic approach, yeah, you can always use
Mm.
AI agents, which is the highest and the newest trend. But that's not how also things should work, in my opinion.
Mm. Mm. To talk a little bit about hiring for like data roles, which I think is becoming more kind of competitive or kind of more complex because the expectations from data professionals are going beyond just like technical skills now. But from your experience, what do you think is most important when hiring for data teams?
Yeah. Yeah, of course, this is also very generic, because nowadays data is a huge spectrum of
Yeah.
skills that you need to have. So we are quite specific, and I also support that. So we have, for example, a data engineering role within under the data. So if you need someone, of course, with the skill set of moving, transforming, wrangling, sorting the data in a highly efficient manner, using, of course, state-of-the-art technologies, that's one bucket. You have the bucket of the data managers or the data management consultants. These are the people who, of course, have a background in data engineering or even data analytics, but they do more around, let's say, governance, and they know, for
Mm.
example, what a DAMA book is, and then what are the capabilities from the stuff that we talked about. That's more of also my skill set in a way, like coming from the data engineering, but then ending up into the data management space. So things are all things about data quality, master data management, reference data management, data lineage, master data, etc., etc. And of course, you have on the other side the analytics, and that can be clustered into two. Let's say classic analytics or traditional analytics or advanced analytics. So traditional analytics from dashboarding, building some aggregation, etc. And advanced analytics are more into the AI usage and how to improve it. And what I found over the years, it's really hard to say that someone can do all of this,
Mm.
because that will be like what you have, let's say, in a full stack kind of, let's say, engineer or developer. You
Yep.
know a bit about everything, but you are not focusing on something with the complexity of the data and the nature and the velocity and the variety of it, I think it is really important to also be narrow down the skill set that you need and get an expert on each one of them. Otherwise, it will be just, really hard to manage. And so we do focus on the skills that we have, and we cluster them, let's say, in a bucket like this. And of course, to find them, that's a different story, because indeed, it's really hard to find some skill sets within the community, because also a lot of things are kind of new or fairly new. That means that you also have to look into strategies of maybe rescaling some of your task force that already exist, and how can you provide them a safe passage to a new role from here to there. Because at the end, the core, we all understand the core, right? And we should be able to find some strategies to rescale or even upscale, right? I may be a good data engineer, but have been always working on Hadoop and the ecosystem, let's say, or on Spark that comes there. But if you move into the cloud, that's of course, all those basics matters, but then you can do it in a smarter or more efficient. So we look into the upscaling, let's say, strategies. And if someone is from analytics and wants to do data management, you already know how important the data is. All what they need is to a little bit to rescale on a specific skill, and that's also possible. So I would advise to also think from that perspective, because that can also help a lot.
And we were talking mostly there about these kind of technical skills or hard skills, and we spoke earlier about the importance of balancing automation with kind of human insight. Is there, can the same balance be struck in building and structuring your team, in terms of like, or how important rather for you is it to kind of balance the soft side of things with the hard skills? Do you know what I mean? Or what kind of mindsets do you look for?
Yeah, so we always look for what we call the protagonist kind of mindset. We need people who can speak up, right? And they have an opinion, because if you think of a team that just says yes or no and for whatever what you're saying, that's not a healthy team that you need to work with, because then they become doers. And we love more of the challenger's mindset, right? Of course, you need to do something at the end of the day, but if you do it with confidence and you feel that, hey, I've clarified something, because not always leadership are correct or the other way around. So it has to be a conversation. So we do care about soft skills a lot. And that goes from time management to also like personal brand, to many aspects. And of course, in our also hiring process, we have a lot of checks and exams that should show us also what kind of mindset this person is. Is he or she like curious for learning, active or reactive, thinker, challenger or not? Maybe self-disciplined, can achieve stuff. You give them a pointer and then they can figure out, let's say, an approach. And all these kind of things add up at the end to how that person will react in, let's say, the various tasks that we give, whether it's technical. Not all tasks are technical, by the way. Also, like you need also, let's say, communication skills. You need also knowledge sharing skills. And that's not easy, especially in the highly tech kind of roles, because you can have the most brilliant engineer that he or she can really develop code. But then if you ask them to summarize it on a presentation or share or go to it on stage or just go on a reel internally, that can be very challenging for them. So we try always to have that balance. But also if people are struggling with that, with one of these aspects, we look how can we scale this up and give them the confidence. I do a lot of coaching, for example, for a lot of people in the company where they want to grow their personal brand and they want to, let's say, take a stage and talk about and share an idea. I find this quite interesting. But then when the first iteration, let's say they are shy, they are not able to manage the time, etc. So there's a lot of things that we practice together. And then at the end, we put a target. And when we achieve that target, and that has happened a lot in the last years, that's like my most proudest moments where these people are enabled. And then it comes back in, you see them even rocking afterwards and spreading the knowledge, etc. So I think that's something that I would advise too.
No, really well put. And to talk quickly about emerging trends in data and data management, are there any emerging technologies or trends within data, AI,
Yeah.
or even infrastructure that excite you right now?
Yeah, I think, of course, you cannot have a conversation about data nowadays without AI, right?
Mm,
So I won't focus on the traditional end of the AI, which is the, let's say, the apps that you get or the prompt that you fire, regardless of the models, because they are all good and every week there's a new one and a new
yeah.
benchmark, etc. But what I'm currently interested in how to use AI for data management. How can we automate all these tasks and how can we innovate around them? So an interesting project that I'm working on is how to use AI for generating data quality checks.
Okay.
So you can just through the structure of two tables or the entire database and provide a little bit of metadata around it if you already have these stuff captured. That's why these basics matters because they are
Mm,
enablers for any innovation.
yeah.
And then how can you bootstrap, let's say 70, 80% of the basic DQ checks that no need for a human intervention? That's a
Mm,
huge boost in productivity because
mm,
you will ensure a high quality data without manual labor, without, let's say, hours being there, etc. And we've been successful with that also in my previous employer. We've done that at Ibn Amro, and that was huge hit. So you go there in the marketplace, and then you see all the kind of suggested DQ checks and all what you need. Back to your original question, the human interaction is needed. You
mm,
can just click yes or no,
yep.
that's needed. You cannot just
Yep.
automate without because maybe the metadata was wrong or there has been some
Mm,
quality of the metadata quality on top of the metadata. So you need the person, but then instead of the person searching, scanning, and also putting ideas, etc., they see, let's say, suggestion, and then
yep.
there you can take a call, yes or no. So DQ for or AI for DQ is an important thing that I'm looking for. I'm
Mm,
also quite interested in the AI enterprise search. So all the documents that we have, all the meetings that we attend, all the transcript that can auto generated and then stored somewhere. How can
yep.
you harness all of this in a way that helps you as an employee to also innovate? Because
Mm,
we also have memory extend to a level,
mm,
and the AI doesn't have that. So how can you use all of this data to summarize something, but also to take action, to follow up on stuff? That's also I think it's a very essential trend to keep an eye upon. And of course, the last but not least is the agentic AI and the awareness that comes from slicing and dicing a big problem into small pieces and let an agent work in each one of them and let them
yep.
communicate. That's also fascinates me. I'm been trying it out in many providers, and this is gonna unlock a lot of creativity and a lot of productivity as well.
Mm. Yeah, everyone's talking about the year of agentic AI, right? Where we're well into it. Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, crazy.
Um, exactly. But turning to those listening who might be looking to break into these kind of data leadership roles, what skills or experiences do you think are most critical today for someone looking to get into data management?
Yeah, I would say, of course, you need a little bit of basics because I'm one of the people who believe that a leader that doesn't have the context that can be quite challenging. Of course, there are
Mm,
some exceptions for that, but you need to know what you're talking about. That gives confidence also in your for your team and the other way around. So you need to maybe, if you are starting from scratch, maybe start with learning about one of those pillars. It could be data engineering, could be purely data management or analytics or any of them. Doesn't matter. Just start, and then after you sharpen a little bit your skills and become more solid into some of them, then I would say learn a lot about leadership. Is not just like a title or something that you pursue. It's kind of habit and also
mm,
attitude towards and a huge responsibility towards your team, because I believe that a leader should be the first one to take the blame, but the last one to be thanked. Put that in your mindset, and then you will see how this will reflect on the team, because then you are trying to empower your team. And I've seen a lot of also good and bad leaders in my career, and I try to avoid some of the mistakes where people are not trusting their team. So if you're there, you have to trust your team. You have to enable them. You have to remove any ego that you have in yourself, because a success of one of my team members is like a success of mine for sure, right? But yeah, some people would always become like, anxious about these things. So start in your data, sharpen your skills. What helped me a lot is reaching for a mentor. So I had great mentors during my careers, and they helped me a lot. And those mentors can really, really push you towards your limits, because they also see it from a different angle, and choose wisely a good mentor. And if he or she also in the data space, that would be great. So I would say that these are the things that help me at least to grow into my career. And of course, keep learning, because without knowing and trying and also be on top of the game, you will be outdated in no time. As we said, like every day there's a new model that's coming with a huge benchmark, etc. Recently, Llama 4, let's say, has been announced, a huge revolution. But if you keep up with all of that, of course, it's hard, but you need to keep following. You have to know about the latest trends. I would say you need to build a lot of network around yourself as well, because I am one of the believers of knowledge exchange. That's why, for example, I love the podcast from Proxify, because it brings different dimensions from not just technical, but human, but also organizational challenges, etc. And that makes value, right? It will never be like always inside out. It can be inside out, outside in. So talk to people, exchange ideas. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because we keep doing them every day, and without them, we will never learn. So I hope this helps a bit.
Yeah, no, completely agree. But to wrap up, then, Mahmoud, what's on the horizon for you? What are you most excited about? It can be a new
Yeah.
role,
So
personal, whatever.
yeah, I think a lot of things. Of course, apart from trying to have a good future for my kids, which is the most important priority, I would say. No, work-wise, I'm quite excited about how or the new era that we are stepping into. It's quite interesting times, because we are in a huge revolution, whether we like it, whether we are onboarded or not, and that will change a lot. And you see that companies are investing heavily on AI and LLMs, etc. And that's, in my opinion, not a hype. That's there to stay, because the possibilities are endless. So I'm curious about, let's say, how can we utilize all these great technologies for ourselves and become more productive, and don't just get so defensive about it. Yeah, I don't need it, I don't want it, because I always say, like, yeah, you can lose your job for someone, not for an AI, but for someone who or knows how to use a lot of AIs and get things done. So I'm a lot excited about that. And also, maybe I'm also in my next career, not now, but maybe soon, also looking into how I can step into also become more an entrepreneur kind of a person, and a lot of ideas that for some product and services that can help the community that I'm working upon. But yeah, let's see. Maybe next time we talk, then we have something else to share.
Yeah, for sure. Fantastic. Well, Mahmoud, we've covered a hell of a lot today, from experimentation at scale to team culture, AI, future of data, hell of a lot. So it's been really, really nice to hear your insights and have your energy here on the podcast. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Lee. Thanks all for
Thank
Proxify
you.
team, and love to see you later. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, share with your fellow builders. Until next time, keep innovating, keep building, and we'll see you soon.